You made it, amazing.
Yeah, I got to charge you.
Wood Road.
Took me 3 years to realize that.
They were in the.
Okay, we want to bring this Strategic Planning Committee meeting of Monday, August the 3rd, 2015 to order. All are present and accounted for, and we will now have the invocation and pledge. Dear Lord, we want to thank you for all the good things that you've given us here in Ascension Parish, all the good people, and again this week we've lost one of the stalwarts of the community, with Miss Ruby Roth, and we'd like to give our sympathies to the family and all the other people that have left us. We'd like to also be thankful for them and their families. We'd like to ask that you allow us to make good decisions for the people in this parish, and that as we leave, everyone gets home safely. We ask all this in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak on any agenda item, please come up here and sign a card, and you will be given your time to speak at that particular agenda. Number 4, discussion of traffic studies. Bob Horner. This is something that we've kind of done the last couple of months to try to get a handle on, to give a background to people, try to get a handle on traffic studies that were done for the parish, especially for subdivision development, and see what it gives us and so on and so forth. So, Mr. Bob, with our ongoing discussion, you have the floor.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Before you, committee members, you have a short synopsis of a packet that I wanted to kind of remind you of some of the things that we have available and that we have been doing. And then this is somewhat an overview, but as we get into it, if you have any specific questions about a given area, if you just let me know, we'll be sure to focus on that. What you have is the Ascension Parish Major Street Plan. On the second page of that, or on the back of the first page, you see that this was adopted in the first part of 2013 by both the Commission, the Planning Commission, and the Council. And it's located on our website. It's Appendix 13 as a part of the Unified Development Code, Land Development Code, under the Planning and Development Department's information. The third sheet is an overview of the various road segments that fall within our adopted major street plan. If when you get into the major street plan, you'll see that a lot of that is just to start to identify the classifications of roads and rights-of-ways and design criteria to be able to protect those corridors for future needs of transportation that we might have in the parish. And on the next page, you see an example of one of those that we have pulled together for the roads shown on that first map. But this is what's referred to as an urban arterial. Again, you'll notice that the right-of-way is a 90-foot right-of-way. That by no means is what is existing on the roads that have been designated that, but that's where we are with the need for future planning. As well as you'll see a typical section of what the roadway, when fully developed for fully built out condition, would look like. There's also a list of which roads have been classified as UA2 or Urban Arterial 2, and as shown on the map below that. And then in the lower right-hand corner is just an overview of again, the planning concept of what the roadway corridor should entail. The last two items on that list are ADT, or average daily traffic, and the level of service. We're in the process of compiling all of those, and as a part of that, we've been engaged now for 2 years since this plan was developed to actually do traffic counts on various roads throughout the parish. And that's on the last 2 pages. You'll see in 2014 the list of roadways that we have counted traffic on. And then in 2015, you'll see a partial list of what we've done thus far. There are several criteria when you do a traffic count as far as days of the week and times of year. And as soon as the school sessions are back in play, we'll start counting another section of roads for the 2015 package. For each of them, we have statistics and that start to look at average or the number of vehicles that travel the roadway at certain speeds. It begins to collect a snapshot in time of the average daily traffic that is on that roadway, so that then we can start to compare those and calculate using the geometrics of the system of the road and the classification, the level of service. I didn't really get into too much of the level of service this time, but what I would like to do is continue this on a kind of a continuing basis to bring along and show you where we are as a parish in future meetings.
Okay. So, my understanding that these major roads are set up for gradually working towards all of these criteria?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then all of these other roads that we have here are little connector roads that we have some basis for setbacks and so on and so forth.
That's correct. And as we progress through the improvement for capacity on the major network, then we'll also be trying to improve the other roads as well, either through new developments coming in are being built to these standards. And if you go into again, if you go into the website and pull that, or if you can't find that, just let me know and I'll send you a PDF that you can see all of the various classifications for instance, just a local subdivision type of road or a local road.
Okay. Now, how are we taking into account this for, let's just say, a subdivision and what impact it has? Or are we doing that whenever we give subdivision developers their criteria for what they need to do to locate?
What we have found, and I don't have any specific numbers, we can try and generate some of those, because what we've started to do are to look at the traffic impact studies as well as where they fall within this corridor. And the several that we've looked at begin to show us that if you recall, there were 4 ranges of categories for traffic impact studies that we looked at. Off the top of my head, I think it was 0 to 35, and then 35 to 70, and on up. Most of what we're finding the developments that are being processed are in a category, and we had talked about this time before last, I think, are being processed in a category that really fall below the level of service criteria, where they're just, the only requirements are to look at entrance, geometries for entrance and exit, turn lanes and things like that.
Well, I mean, that's gonna always be the case. They
Sure.
can't adjust to it. If you, whatever number you put,
That's
it's
right.
economically feasible, and they
Oh,
will divide it up and
absolutely.
do it in 2 phases instead of 1. I mean, that's why they're doing it,
Right.
so, and our question is, what happens whenever, that's why we're trying to find something that will apply equally to everyone, and I know the only way you can do that is with impact fees. Now, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we are requiring impact fees for a subdivision, and,
That's really more of.
yeah, we are, we requiring them for a certain, dollar amount, $1,000 for traffic for these
I know
subdivisions.
I know the planning department has been talking to folks about a voluntary
Yeah.
payment to help improve the local
But-
traffic, but I'm not.
It's voluntary, but they do tell you that if you don't participate, you're not gonna get recommended at the planning commission, so, and I can,
Mr. Chairman, I think we're getting off a little bit on here.
well, and I'm
Well-
trying to, what I'm trying to say, that we're asking for, are we asking for voluntary, fees, or are we not? And if we are they voluntary? Or are we putting stipulations on it?
Well, I can say that there is nothing, that's not ordinance that's passed, but just like any negotiation for traffic impacts, whether you put in a turn lane or whether you do some, those things are negotiated to try to mitigate the traffic impact. On and I think that's the kind of negotiation that planning and zoning is trying to go through to see what can we do to mitigate it, because there are conversations sometimes about additional turn lanes, about different things to try to solve the issue. If you remember the presentation that Mr. Horner made, I guess a few weeks ago, and I know what you're saying, Chairman, is how do we make it a fair distribution of a
Right.
of a cost? And I think that we went through the process, and of course there was the determining the level of service, where that is that we don't want to go below. Then we know that, and then based on that, the recommendation from administration was looking at several other communities, parishes, counties that have implemented things to say there would be kind of a traffic development fee that would be served per lot, okay, that the developer would pay. That way, whether you're doing a 400-lot subdivision or whether you're doing a 40-lot subdivision, it would be fair, to whomever is doing it. And I think that was in the presentation. So the question was, how do we go through about looking at level of service? And Mr. Horner was trying to follow through with the recommendations, and the questions from this committee is, what is the level of service or where we are now?
Right.
And bottom line is that, probably very low, if any, but we're still going through the process to establish what that level of service would be.
And my basic concern is this: we all know that we're at an F for just about everything. So yes, we should. Okay, there's no question about that. But if we use the idea of traffic because of traffic concerns, and we require that for certain people, and then we do it without requiring it for businesses or individual homeowners, is that going to fly muster, or are we going to have problems if somebody contests this? That's what I'm.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard through the rumor mill, always not the best source, but sometimes it can be accurate. What our chairman is saying is that this parish is encouraging at the planning department level payment of a fee. I've heard the number $1,000 and so forth per lot. Strictly volunteer, so forth and so on. Personally, I hope that's not the case. If so, it's disappointing to me. It may or may not matter, but I do believe in fairness. Unless we have an ordinance, I don't know why we're encouraging one people to do one thing and others not to. And when I say others not to, I attended just a few days ago a meeting required by the Land Development Code for the councilman in the area where development was going to occur. Again, it's infamous Highway 73. And Bob, I see you smiling. It's not the hollows of Dutchtown. And I want to apologize. I've been calling it Dutchtown Hollows. But the engineer for that was also at this other preliminary meeting I'm going to get to in a minute, indicated to me that it's hollows of Dutchtown. That's that big one with the 200, and I think you did your study on that, and that's what brought up this discussion, which I hope is forthcoming very soon on level of service so we can hopefully enact some laws. But I was curious at the meeting, and it never came up. 22 townhomes. I believe the name I captured was Myrtle Grove Townhomes. It's going to be on 73 right when you cross over the railroad tracks on the left-hand side where a current trailer exists that will be demolished and some trees taken out to put in that development. We were told at the meeting that there are no traffic impact studies even needed for such a small development, and that brought up the issue that this committee's been talking about, and I know Kent talks about it a lot because this district is more like, you know, a district where you'd put up something smaller with 20, 40, 50 lots. Mine, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at this growth, is 200, 300 lots at a crack. Well, here's a smaller one in my district, but it's on that same affected street that everybody knows we just widened, traffic nightmares that are involved there and everything else. But again, I heard nothing about them voluntarily putting up any money. So again, I reiterate, if that's going on, I'm glad the chairman brought this up tonight. We need to look into that, and I would think we need to stop it until this committee can send a recommendation to the full council stating that we would like the existing law to change this way or that way. And I hope that that winds up happening very soon and involves something to do with level of service, Bob, when we get those numbers and so forth, where we can make a real informed decision. This is good. I've seen this stuff that you're presenting here today before, going through the Transportation Committee, et cetera. But just to be absolutely clear, what I really need to see, especially in my district, especially since you did that 200 home site study, and especially with the comment that Ken also made a minute ago, which is spot on at almost everything, certainly my district is an F already. And so no wonder it's no significant impact, because it can't get no worse than worse. As an old college professor, when I flunked somebody, there was an F put on that paper. I don't think the student cared very much if it had an F minus. It was still an F. And so we need to address this, because this 22 home site, Myrtle Grove, it's coming up on 73 in my district again. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm not trying to discourage it, and I think it's, in this case, frankly, I think it's going to happen unless people come out of the woodwork. Heck, in that particular area, I was told there's not even any adjacent property owners, because it's all vacant land. There's a concrete plant right across the street. There's a significant amount, because it's at the end of the highway, not toward the middle in any way. So it's a good bit of commercial around there, and people probably will not complain. But when the traffic gets even worse from another 22 home sites and so forth, we really need to get this information, and we need to pass a recommendation on to the full council and decide what are we going to do in the future. And I believe that recommendation has to, based on the study that Mr. Horner has done in the past, which everybody knows I'm on record, I'm in love with it, you know, because it addressed what Mr. Compton has said multiple times when I was a Planning and Zoning Commission, and even before that. Traffic impact studies aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Let's be about it. Let's get it done. And in the meantime, if we just getting some volunteer monies and everything, that might sound good. I also agree with the chairman, but what's going to happen when someone comes into court and challenges it? And especially when the comment, if they're being told, I heard that a minute ago, maybe they've been told that or not, that, hey, if you want to get it approved, you might want to put that money up. That's no way to run a government. I'm not saying that's happening. I have no data one way or another on it. But if it is, we need to talk to some folks. And I don't know, maybe, Mr. President, you'd want to address that, or?
I will certainly, I've heard on a couple occasions where developers did volunteer to do it, and on their own merit. So, we'll talk to Mr. Compton about that and
But
see.
they're not being told that, you know, if you do so, you're gonna get your thing approved. because
I would think not, and I would
I'm
hope
very
not.
sensitive to that, as you know, Mr. President, because that's by definition what I learned in ethics training, and this goes all the way back, don't want to, old wounds, but that's an ex parte communication by definition. That's telling somebody that, you know, if you put this money up, you might get approved.
I don't think that that's the case at all.
It's not, and I don't believe it is either.
I would strongly recommend that whoever would say that would be fired. If I would probably fire him on the spot if I would find out that that was happening. So,
Very
you know,
fine, sir. Again, I'm not saying it's happening, but I appreciate that because
but-
it's
but you know, you're talking about solutions. This is something that, I mean, I can go back. The other day I was cleaning out my drawer and I found a piece of paper from my first 6 months in office, 1994, June, actually, from the Advocate, where at that time I recommended impact fees to the council. So I can bring that piece of paper and show it to you. I still recommend impact fees. Right now, you look at what other parishes are doing, it's just going to take some willpower of the council to make a decision and to vote. Now, if you don't do that, we can sit here. I mean, this is the same plan that we've been mulling over since we've been in here. If you look at the traffic study and the model that we have, it's the one that we presented when Roads for Change. I mean, the plan was good. The plan hadn't changed, okay? We don't have a loop, but we do have a square around Ascension Parish that will help us get to and from there. And again, the problem is that it costs money to do these things. We're looking at $200 to $300 million to do what we say in this plan. Now, I don't have a magic wand to give us $200 million. I don't think that you're ever going to raise it by doing what we're doing here. So, you know, the only way you're going to get some influx here is to do impact fees. I mean, we've recommended from this group in our administration that you look at a $3,000 lot impact fee. But I don't think there's anybody on this board at this point that's willing to vote for that.
Mr. President,
I don't know.
you can
That's
count
just
me.
my opinion.
Thank you for these comments. These
So-
are wonderful things, and they make me almost drunk with pleasure. I would love to vote anytime soon
Well,
on impact fees.
You
I
have the
think
opportunity.
I would,
to
I
do
see Mr.
something.
Trefisi is in the room. As soon as Gasper brings a recommendation forward from that impact fee committee to us, I hope it gets past this committee and an
But
affirmative
remember-
recommendation to do it, because let's just consider these two developments I've been talking about.
That's not
200
going to.
in Hollows of Dutchtown, now 22 in his townhomes. We're missing the opportunity to make them developments have less impact than they're going to have.
Right. But
And
to
we don't want to be
do
relying on the
this,
state to widen 73 again and go
This-
through all that.
this plan is going to take a lot more money than impact fees. Impact fees are just a portion of what it's going to take.
Correct, but we
I
can start.
hear all kind of people say, I'm not for taxes. I don't want to raise taxes. They need to do what they're going to, what they have, they can do with, and they can build these roads. That's not true.
But the
I just
Attorney
want to
General
go on
has,
record to say.
yeah, but the Attorney General has rendered opinion recently, right, to Gasper's
That it's not a
committee.
tax.
Not a tax.
No, I'm not, that's what I'm saying.
Not a tax.
Hey, if you're
So I
not for
think my
taxes,
people are gonna be
you can
fine
be
with
for
it.
impact fees.
In fact, I've even heard Bob call it housing fee.
Right.
Whatever you need to call it, and if it's legal, everybody else is doing it, and it forces the people coming to brush their knuckles a little bit with the people that are already here. Growth is a wonderful thing, none of us will argue that, but unbridled growth, not the infrastructure guided growth. Let's put as much of this infrastructure as we can in up front. One way to do that, impact, housing fees, whatever you want to call it, let's do it, let's get on it,
You
please.
got a law now that says you can do road districts. If you want to do road districts, all the council's got to do is say, let's start all new development, we're going to create a road district.
Ms. Castle.
Same difference, but anyway, I'm going to get off the bandwagon here.
Ms. Castle.
Yes, well, I will certainly join Doc in going on the record as supportive of impact fees. And I have we, from the Finance Committee, put in place a committee to study those fees. As Doug mentioned, there has been a recent Attorney General's ruling. I think we need to give that committee the time they want and need to make sure this stuff is fair, that it covers everything that we could possibly need. Certainly it can't be all things to all people, but the recommendation needs to be one that has been well vetted. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from that committee, but I'm not going in that room and telling them how quickly they must do their work. I believe that they have a lot of information to sift through. And then, I will, at that point, call on my fellow councilmen to support that recommendation. And it will be interesting to see who, even those who say they will vote for it, who actually does. And, I think I have shared this with other people, so I don't mind sharing it publicly. It's a 2/3 vote. It takes 8. And I can count. I listen to enough members of this committee and others who who say they're either for it or they're not for it. They might be for it. So it's going to be, it depends on what it says. I might be for it. It depends on what it says. So, I want us to do this in a way that when we bring this to the voters, to this body, that we have a support for it, reasonable support, or at least the reasonable confidence that it will pass. Because if we don't, 10 years ago, I think it was brought before the council. What was the magic number? 10 years ago? It failed. And when it failed then, it has taken 10 years to revive it. If this comes out as a recommendation and someone is not happy with the details, then we will be 10 years again before we get a chance to look at this. And we do not have 10 more years. So I think literally we need to be strategic. It does not come to this committee until it's ready. It does not get voted on by this committee until this committee is ready, looking at it. And then it goes to the council. And we hope at that point that it is well formulated, that it speaks to the needs of each and every councilman at the table, and that all of them can support it, or at least 8 of them can support it. 7 won't get it. Now, if I can move on to something else, I need to add, while I've got the floor, if I may, just so I don't forget to do it, Bob. I've been troubled by brain scramble for the last month or so, but I noticed that Highway 73 on the major street plan, there's a section of that is a UA2. It's not on the UA2 list back here as I'm seeing, so I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding the map.
It looks as though perhaps a portion of 73 is.
That's what I'm saying, it's a
but-
section of it.
Right, but not the entire
Right.
amount.
So
right.
should it be listed under the UA2 classified roadways, at least the portion?
Good point, yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Then my next question is, I had the real pleasure last week of meeting with Dr. Calavota to discuss some issues in District 8. We've been working together with DOTD for a couple of years now, but that's a major study that's being done. Dr. Calavota had, together with his staff, put together what looked like a really good good use plan. And so I'm excited about it, and I want to know how I need to get that to you so that it can come to us for approval to the master street plan. I believe that my fellow members of the Strategic Planning Committee would look at this plan and see it as something that ought to be part of that major street plan. Certainly, Dr. Calavota at DOTD and his staff recommend that it be part of a major street plan. And, you know, I think there's no better time like now to get that done. So would I just have him send you a PDF of that plan?
I believe I've spoken with him about that already.
Okay.
If it's the same thing, we can get together after the meeting just to make sure we're on the same page.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, I think it's in the back seat of my car.
Very good. I'm reasonably excited about it. I mean, I think that, you know, it's going to mean a lot to that corridor. It's taken a lot of time, and I wish it had been faster, but it's just one of those things. And the one thing I have certainly have learned in this business in the last 3 years is you better not get frustrated and impatient, because can't change it. It has taken a while, but there is what looks like a rock solid idea. Certainly, it's open to your criticism and any input you want to have. But we'll see to it. We'll see after the meeting. Thank you
Okay.
so much for sharing that with me.
Councilman Johnson?
I guess my question with all of this is as I remember this conversation started was, is there a study available to us? Or can we come up with a study that's going to show legitimate impacts on development in this parish? That's the question, in my opinion. Point blank. Enough. I mean, if the impact studies come about or the impact fees come about and that resolves this issue, that's one thing. But up until the point in time that happens, the easier fix is if there is an on-the-shelf study that we can require these developers to do as they build out, or whether it be large businesses, whatever our ordinances say. And if we want to change the ordinance to where we start including smaller business developments or what have you, let's have those discussions. But right now, as I appreciate it, the conversation has been about development for subdivisions. And my take on this is that the people that live in this parish are tired of developments coming about and not being any traffic impact. I think we've had maybe 2 or 3 subdivisions that have come about that have actually shown some kind of an impact. I realize most of the roads around here are F's, and that's not only through the development of what's happened over the last 30, 40 years, but we've had to come up with a plan, I think, and we're working that plan to try to get our roads in better shape as best we can. And of course, we're behind the times with that, and our dollars are being stretched pretty thin with that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to future growth and what kind of study are we going to require these folks to do to come up with some legitimate results. If the result is nothing, just by the developments in Dan's area, I could see where maybe a 22 resident condo or apartment complex may not have that much of an impact in what you already have, or 0 impact. But a 200 home impact is going to, or 200 home subdivision is going to have some kind of an impact. Should, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but the traffic study showed what? Nothing. That's a problem, in my opinion. So what I'm looking for is give me a study that shows whether or not these developments have legitimate impacts or not. It's got to be fair to them, but it's got to be fair to us as well. And whatever the results of that are, they live with it. We live with it. But that's all I'm looking for, guys. I'm not looking to rewrite anything else. I'm just looking for a simple study that has a legitimate analysis for what we're looking for. We can sit here and talk about this all night long if we want to and not solve the problem. But at the end of the day, is there such an animal out there? And if it is, get it to us. That's all I need. Thank you.
Anything?
I'll be real quick, Mr. Chairman. And it goes back to where we started. It's the level of services that we need to come to an agreement on. I think it was step 3. At least meet the minimum. And I'll be looking forward to what's coming from Mr. Bob and him, so
Okay.
appreciate it.
I think our chairman wanted to say something. Randy?
Thank you, Chair, Jake Snyder and board. Real quick, on this subject, I agree with Benny. I don't think anybody for a long time has had any confidence in some of the traffic studies that we've seen for developments on the impact on the smaller roads. Not necessarily airline highway or the big state roads, but even on some of them. But I just want to inject one thing. Parish President Morton has explained it, but we do know that on this impact fee, whatever you want to call it, toward the subdivision developers, that they've had requests that went out, okay? And I'm sure that Mr. Compton can show you what he's requested of the folks, okay? So that they've had requests, voluntary requests for in-depth traffic studies toward a developer for the subdivision development phase, whatever that they're doing. And I guess we said it 7 years ago, we probably said it 4 years ago and 3 years ago, is you know, if you got a road that's a F, the study's not gonna change it much, it's gonna remain an F. If you got one that's an A, it'll probably change it. But I agree with Benny, I just don't know if there's a simple answer, but that's all we're trying to achieve, is what is the long-term effects, and I think that's what the administration's working on. But just to let you know that I have talked to a developer, they have been requests that came out of the planning department for them to voluntarily some type of fee for a further impact study on development that rolls it into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And it can be a combination for a single, I mean, if it's too small to actually have something that they can build, we would be fine if they would donate something to the parish for, but it just should be something equal. That's what we're looking for. Also, and I'm sorry, Mr. Ken.
Yes, I'm sorry, man. Just one thing, you know, one of the first things that in Bob's presentation he did a couple of meetings ago was that even to define or have a study done, you have to have a standard of where you're not going to go below. So that level of service at some point has to be established, because if it's still at F, even if you do a study, it's going to still show there's no benchmark. So at some point, we have to say we don't want to go below a C and then do a study to keep it there. So I just wanted to, I know we discussed that.
Well, we could say whatever impact it has, and that's fine, you know. Well, however y'all want to do it, but we just want to get something that we can have some definitive thing, and as Doc says, for the record, I may be the only one here that has voted for an impact fee already, and I'll be glad to vote for it again. So we'll move on. Number 5, discussion of utility construction procedures for subdivisions. We had been talking about this. Ken, you were going to go and.
Yes, I'm just gonna, and I apologize for not having, could you hand this down to? This is, of course, last meeting, we asked our council to actually go through and kind of make the changes to the ordinance that will focus on what needs to be done for utilities. If you look at the section that's underlined, it says what we kind of discussed in this committee meeting. And that's on the section A. The underline, it says that all utilities shall be located in the designated utility servitude and installed as follows. Any utilities passing through a public right-of-way must pass through a designated penetration in the public right-of-way as submitted in the construction plans and approved by the parish engineering review agent. Or, gets an alternative, all utilities must be installed and compaction tests completed and approved before a final plat may be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that gives 2 options. In the design phase, they could look at the sleeves or penetrations and go through there, or if they don't want to do that, they just have to make sure that compaction test is done, and then approval will be done. The final plat won't be issued until all utilities are in.
And who's going to inspect this?
If it goes through the parish right-of-way, goes through the road, our inspectors are looking at that penetration going in. That's what our inspectors are going to do, look at that penetration going in.
And what if it's on the side and it's within our right-of-way, and they got to have it installed in a compaction test? Who's gonna?
Yeah.
I mean, we're saying they have to do it, but
Yeah, if it's,
How do we know they're doing it?
so you say if it's not in our right, or if it's still in
No,
our
if
right?
it's in our utility servitude that we require, and how do we know whether it's there or it's encroaching upon our road?
I mean, well, our inspectors are gonna look at that penetration going underneath our road.
Okay, it's gonna be
But if it's
checked.
in the utility servitude, as our legal counsel was here last meeting, you know, it's not, that's the responsibility of the developer if it's in the utility servitude.
Well-
But if it goes underneath our road, we're gonna be looking at it.
It was my understanding, and I'm not trying to be picky, but this is what ends up happening where we have the problems, is that between the utility servitude and apparently and the edge of the road, I think we're not supposed to put utilities within 6 feet of the road. What's
Yeah,
the
there's a
number?
dimension
Something like that.
keeps them back, right.
That's one of the problems, and that's what I would like the parish to inspect. If they're outside of that, that's fine. But that hadn't been the case in the past. They've encroaching upon our road area where we've had damage to our roads, I think, Doc. That's what we found.
Okay, so they
And
have
so-
not been obeying the actual spacing
Right.
from the right-of-way to the utility servitude,
Right.
is what you're saying.
And because we were assuming that they would be in the utility servitude, we wasn't inspecting it. But the fact of the matter is, they're not going into that area as it actually plays out. So I would just like to see us inspecting that to make sure that they're where they're supposed to be and go from there. That would put the parish in a lot better shape.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And I'll vouch for Mr. DeArmond, in my daily activities, working in utilities for 30 years now. Believe me, the parish is checking, and he's watching depths, he's watching the right-of-way. So, I mean, he's out there, he's watching it, so.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Any other further questions or anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, not a question, but just a comment. Mr. Dawson, thank you very much. This is just what the doctor ordered. No pun intended. The idea of the penetration, I'm glad to see it. So are we looking today for a recommendation to the full council? We can't do that.
We're going to have to wait. We didn't have it on the agenda.
Okay.
We had discussion.
And I assume everybody's comfortable, because this was a two-bladed, double-edged sword here. One is under the road, and as Ken is correctly pointing out, certainly my problem in Bouillon and his in Pelican and elsewhere, along the side of their road.
Right.
Them rascals are putting stuff in there,
Yes, sir.
utility companies, and it's failing.
All right, and that's,
We gotta be sure we're policing that, because failure is failure.
Okay.
Whether it goes across the road in like an expansion crack thing, or whether it's along the side, we don't want to be victimized by it, or have the people that are buying into these subdivisions later on after we take the roads in and blah, 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 all the stuff we've been through.
yeah. And as Council Lambert said, Mr. DeArmond does a good job of looking at all this stuff, and I was gonna check with him, because I thought that spacing was being watched by him, because it's kinda easy just to look at that spacing, but I was gonna speak with him about it.
All right. So we put some real teeth back in that.
President?
We can put this on the next council agenda in 2 weeks as an introduction. It doesn't have to be a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, we
As long
can.
as, you don't need I don't need a resolution to put
Yeah.
it on the agenda.
Okay, well, we just can't vote on it tonight because
No,
it's not. in
but
the agenda.
I think I can put it on, we'll do that and see what happens.
And we can have it next month's recommendation and have it in time for.
And if we see that we need to hire another person to inspect this stuff, where we get behind or something, and to get more thorough, I mean, I'm not opposed to that either, or designate someone else to get to that point, okay?
Okay. Any other comments? With that, we go on to number 6.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Satterley. This meeting is adjourned.